And when it all, we have Jake Johnson starring as a guy with a gambling addiction, and yet somebody tasks them with looking after a bag full of money while they do time in jail. Which means that this film basically revolves around one big giant plot hole. If you're a criminal that needs money kept safe, maybe don't leave it with your gambler friend. All I'm saying is, if you were friends with the McCanns, would you let them look after your kids? When It All is the newest Joe Swanberg and Jake Johnson collaboration, and it follows the character of Eddie Garrett, played by Johnson. He's the usual Jake Johnson lovable loser man-child, but one with a pretty serious gambling addiction. He's a man who seems to spend all of his money in seedy Chinatown gambling dens to the point where he can't even pay for a cup of coffee in the morning. And one day, Eddie comes home and finds an intimidating acquaintance sitting in his kitchen who offers him what should be an easy proposition. Look after this bag while I'm in jail. Don't open it, don't look inside it, just keep it aside, and once I'm outside I'll pay you $10,000, no questions asked. But of course Eddie does look in the bag, and when he finds it's full of money he can't help but gamble himself into a debt so big it threatens his very life. If you're not aware of who Joe Swanberg is, he's a prolific indie filmmaker and one of the key figures in the so-called mumblecore genre. And if you're not aware of what mumblecore is, it's a sort of very naturalistic style of low-budget filmmaking, often with improvised dialogue as opposed to written scripts and almost no plot. It's a style that definitely has its fans but also has a huge amount of detractors, with many people probably quite rightly describing it as a bit pretentious, self-indulgent, and worst of all, hipster. Me, I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. Swanberg and mumblecore might be inseparable, but When It All is definitely his most cohesive movie to date, with a complete story arc and a conventional 3-act structure. It does have a lot of the usual characteristics of a mumblecore film. Low budget, heavily improvised dialogue, and likeable characters in their late 20s, early 30s just getting through life, but without the extremely loose narrative. Following Drinking Buddies and Digging for Fire, which they also wrote together, Joe Swanberg and Jake Johnson decided that this time they wanted clear plot points mapped out, giving us a kind of best of both worlds scenario. Swanberg filmed this on 16mm film, which I think is a great choice, as not only does it look pretty, just so pretty, it really embodies that lo-fi charm that permeates just about everything else in the film. He directs the film well, letting the characters really drive the story instead of relying on, or even using, flashy techniques. In fact, he updates the viewer on the ever-mounting debt by just periodically displaying some simple text in the bottom corner that shows how much Eddie has gambled and lost. Also, this might just be pure luck or coincidence, but I got the impression that the weather reflected the emotions of Eddie, as it starts off fairly dull and normal, and then when he gambles and loses big, there's a rainstorm and it stays that way for a while. And as I said, that may just be pure coincidence and I'm looking into it too much, but if not, that's a really nice touch. But even without all the surface sheen, Swanberg does a good job in drawing you into these characters and willing them through it. It reminded me a lot of the 2014 film The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, which to be completely honest, I found very average, and I think a large part of that is that The Gambler just felt too Hollywood. The characters were often too heightened and said things that no normal person would ever say. Plus, the situations that Mark Wahlberg found himself in were just ridiculous. But in When It All, it feels real, which makes us sympathetic to Eddie's situation, but just unreal enough that it's cinematic and engaging. Eddie's a small-time guy on a losing streak. There's no fancy scenes where he counts cards and bets millions on a single hand, but in gambling away a lot of another person's money, a person who, as much as it's not actually expanded on, is clearly dangerous and has the ability to hurt him enough that he seriously considers fleeing the country. We really feel for him when he's down, and in the final scenes I was genuinely saying to the TV, my god, please win, please win. Speaking of Eddie, Jake Johnson is a great lead actor. With actors who are primarily known for big TV roles, i.e. Nick Miller and New Girl, I sometimes have a tendency to see too much of that famous character in whatever they're doing, and I guess that's on me, but in When It All, there's no hint of that. Johnson is excellent as this down on his luck but not naive gambler. He knows he's in a bad situation, he knows he's a bad gambler, but as with many addicts, there's just nothing he can do to stop himself, and the scenes where he's gambling have him going through a million emotions a minute, and all the tics and facial tweaks he displays feel genuine. Also included in the cast is Joe Lo Truglio, who again, being Boyle in Brooklyn Nine-Nine could easily overshadow anything. I mean, come on, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of the funniest TV shows out there at the moment, and if you don't watch it, you need to fix that ASAP. However, in When It All, he forgoes all that high energy, zany comedy that he's so adept at, and he plays it straight. He's still very funny because, of course, he is Joe Lo Truglio, but it's that real world funny funny that's just a pleasure to watch. What we end up with is a charming and surprisingly touching film about trying to keep the joys of life from clashing with the constant struggle of addiction. It doesn't bring anything new to the high stakes gambling arena, but what it does it well, with a cool blue soundtrack, great performances and genuine characters, all accomplished on a tiny budget with a passionate skeleton crew. This is exactly the kind of simple filmmaking I love to see, and honestly wish I could be involved in. With a more structured screenplay, Swanberg delivers a film that has the naturalness of his past work without the overly meandering story, and I hope being released on Netflix means that it can reach that potentially huge audience rather than being buried under the seemingly endless other options, because I think it is a lovely film that can do really well if given a chance. I'm going to give Win It All 4 popcorns. Thanks very much for watching my review of Win It All. If you liked it, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and maybe share this video with a friend. That would help so much. You can click the 2 boxes below to see some of my latest videos, and if there's any of the new releases in particular that you want me to review, let me know in the comments below. So again, thanks for watching this. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.